Here we have the barbell biceps curl. As we see from the sagittal plane movement here, the elbows flexing. And what does that mean for us? That means we are using our biceps. Our biceps are agonist muscle here, our prime mover, biceps brachii, brachialis, and the brachioradialis. Although I do think the brachioradialis is mostly used during a reverse curl variation of the barbell curl. We're going to start off with the stance or the posture of the lifter here. Be an athlete is the first coaching cue I would use here to remind the lifters to be in a good athletic position when lifting here. We see some good knee bend, little hip bend, chest out posture, which is good. Of course, our breathing on the up phase or the concentric phase, we want to be breathing out, and we want to be breathing in on the down phase or the eccentric phase. Some other coaching cues along with be an athlete are tighten up or to keep your core tight is a good one. And another one I love to use is to mind your movers. And what I mean by mind your movers is we don't want to just be lifting to lift. We want to really think about the muscle group or groups that we're using to lift the weight. So really think about your biceps moving the bar instead of just your forearms coming up, and to try to contract the biceps muscle group there. Some points of error on these lifts would probably fall back onto some of the coaching cues mentioned. So be an athlete, we might see some bad posture or things of that nature when doing the lift. Some other things, not keeping your core tight, so telling them to tighten up is another one. And that could probably help with another source of error, which would be too much swaying, right? We don't want to get a bunch of momentum going because we do want the biceps to be doing the work during a biceps lift. Here we have a variation of a tricep extension in the form of a push down or a pull down using a rope attachment. We'll begin with the stance here of the lifter. Coaching cue here to begin. There's not too many coaching cues you can have using a machine, but some things to keep in mind for the athletes or for the lifters you're working with is obviously to be an athlete. And to be an athlete, that means to be in an athletic stance. So we need a little hip bend, little knee bend, get some good posture in your back, keep your chest out. For the lift consideration, we want to remember to get full range of motion here, which the lifter does a good job. That was one thing I did not mention in the biceps barbell curl, was the ability to get full range of motion, which the lifter did a great job then as well. But here we see full arm extension, right? And what extends our arms? Our triceps brachii, which is our main mover here, our agonist mover. And we come all the way back up. Next, we'll go into some other coaching cues that might be, tighten up, keep the core tight, things like that. Some common pieces of error or sources of error for a triceps extension using a rope might be, uncontrolled lifting. So you might see the lifter flying up on the up phase or the eccentric phase. So you want to go controlled all the way through the lift, of course. Some other sources of error could be not being an athlete, right? So we're not in a good athletic stance. We don't have good posture. We're kind of just pulling down, and the lift doesn't mean anything. So we want to make sure we do have good posture here. We're working through a full range of motion. We're controlling the weight on the up phase or eccentric phase and the concentric or the down phase. Some other things you want to think about are breathing, of course. You always want to breathe through your lifts. So we're breathing out on the down phase or the concentric phase, and then we're breathing in on the way up. And remembering our coaching cues to be an athlete, have good posture, and to keep the core tight to stabilize yourself. Here we'll begin with a form of tricep extension, also known as a skull crusher, here lying on the flat bench. We want to remember to keep 5 points of contact: your left foot, your right foot, your rear end, your upper back of your shoulders, and your head. We also want to remember that we are hinging here at the elbows when we're going through the lift here with a tricep extension using our agitus muscle, wouldn't you know it, the tricep, extending our arms here. We want to keep controlled on this lift as well. Get good full range of motion all the way through here and get the elbows extended or the arms extended. Some things to think about when you're coaching through a lift like this would be to tighten up, right? We got our 5 points of contact helping stabilize us, but we also want to think about our main stabilizer, our abdomen, our abs here. Keep those tight, because on the down phase, the eccentric phase here, when you're using a lighter weight like 40 pounds, it's not that big of a deal. But you get into some heavier weight, 80 plus, that weight is going to tend to try and pull you down, right? So we want to keep our core tight, keep us stabilized on the bench as well. Of course, breathing out on the concentric phase the way up, breathing in on the eccentric phase the way down. Some common sources of error probably could be, not having 5 points of contact, maybe moving your shoulders a little too much. We see the lifter here having some good hinge point at the elbows, maybe less movement at the shoulder, but at this point we're getting a little ticky-tacky with our points here and just looking for things that are wrong. But we want to make sure that we're just hinging at the elbows because we are trying to work on our elbow extender, the triceps. Next we'll move into some shoulder stuff here with a lateral shoulder raise. Some coaching cues to begin with, be an athlete like we mentioned before. Slight knee bend, slight hip bend. Keep your chest out and your head forward here. One thing for this particular lift, the lifter does not appear to keep his elbows slightly flexed here. Although it doesn't appear that he's locking them out, we could probably see a little bit more elbow flex there. Another coaching cue we can think about, tighten the core, tighten up. We mentioned that one before. Lifter does a good job of getting the arms horizontal with the shoulders here as well. Some common sources of error probably do stem from bad posture or not being an athlete, not keeping the elbows flexed, maybe trying to use too much momentum to get the dumbbells up, going too high, or also not getting full range of motion, right? Ego lifting, we don't want to use too much weight here. We want to be able to move all the way through the joint here in the frontal plane or abduction movement of the dumbbells. And since we are moving in that frontal plane or abduction movement, we're going to be using our delts, mainly our lateral delts, to lift our arms up. Moving on, we'll get into some pressing exercises here. We'll begin with the strict press or the military press. We got the athlete started in a good athletic position, right? Coaching cue, be an athlete. If you see them getting off balance or anything, allow them to get into an athletic position. Of course, tighten up or keep your core tight will be big on these ones, stabilizing yourself as you're pushing weight overhead here. The up phase, of course, we want them breathing out concentrically, eccentrically breathing in on the way down. So we see the lifter does a good job there. We're going to be using our traps, probably upper traps or mid traps, both of those. Anterior delts are engaged, and we also have some triceps work as we extend the elbows here into the top of the lift. This one we're not using any leg engagement, right? We're just pushing up with our arms and our shoulders, keeping a tight core and keeping an athletic stance here. We don't want to do it straight-legged, right? We might get off balance, and we do not want to do that anytime we're pushing weight overhead. A coaching cue I have not been able to use yet in previous lifts are pretty prominent here on these power lifts, like the strict press and next into the push press, would be to explode. And so on these power lifts, right, we want to be a little more powerful. We want to have some velocity in there. We're not moving like turtles. We want to explode through the lift. So although they could explode more here on this lift, that's a coaching cue that we could give this lifter to be powerful through the lift. Does a good job getting the bar overhead, slightly behind the ears at the top, elbows fully extended. Good grip, slightly wider than shoulder width as well, along with the be an athlete stance here, being athletic. Some sources of error in this could include using your legs in a lift like this that don't require them. Of course, not engaging in the coaching cues like being athletic, be an athlete, right? Tighten up, tighten the core up, things of that nature. Exploding through, or explode as the coaching cue is called. Other sources of error besides that could be too narrow at the base, right? We want our feet to be nice and shoulder width to slightly shoulder or outside shoulder width, right? Get a good base here, along with the be an athlete. Some other things to think about for sources of error would be a narrow grip with the hands, not fully extending or going through the full range of motion, right? Not coming all the way down either. And finally, just getting it mixed up with a push press when you're using your lower body, when this is supposed to be a shoulder engagement and core engagement. And lastly, we get here into the push press, the last of our power exercises we'll be demonstrating here. Similar to the strict press or the military press, the athlete's feet will be at shoulder width or hip width apart, and their hands also slightly wider than shoulder width. We want a pronated grip as well. First coaching cue that you could use is obviously to be an athlete here. Good athletic stance. Keep the core tight, as with all the other lifts, especially these power lifts. And one thing to note is to explode. That's another coaching cue to use. These are power exercises. Power should use velocity. Of course, the lighter weight, the quicker you'll be. Heavier weight, the slower you'll be. But you still want to attempt to explode through these exercises. See, the lifter does a good job of dipping underneath the bar. We see hip and knee extension and flexion on the down face to up face here. We'll see that again from the side view here. So we start from the starting position. We will get knee flexion, hip flexion, before exploding and extending the bar up with our arms above our head here. We're moving through a sagittal plane here as well, working major muscles that include the glute max, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, rectus femoris, soleus, gastroc, delts, and the traps. Another one that I would like to add in there would be the triceps with the full arm extension here at the top. One thing we also want to make sure is to move through the full range of motion here. So we get the bar set near the upper pec and anterior delts, and we finish clear above our head, behind our ears. Common sources of error could be misplaced feet, Misplaced hands on the bar, not exploding through, not dipping the head underneath. Incorrectly using our legs here. This push press, we should be using our legs as the lifter here flexes his knee and hips before exploding in one motion through the top here.